Hey everyone, and welcome to Qualification Race 1 in Season 6 of the Tom Hanks Racing Series. This time I'm gonna give a little bit of an intro to each car in every head-to-head, and of course I'm gonna start with my own car as well. Then we get to the disqualified cars and then to the actual competitors. My car is the AMW Condor B4. It may not be the most powerful car, but it's got good brakes and a good handling balance, and it's able to put down the power better than most cars. This time we're on Lakeside, and Lakeside is a fairly simple and fairly fast track. Let me give you a little bit of an introduction to the track. So you have the main straight here across the finish line, and then you start with a fast left-hander into a big braking zone because this first corner is reasonably tight. Most cars here are going to take it in either second or third gear depending on gearing, and it's got this sort of double apex. Then you go up the hill onto a fast left-hander where you can't quite see the apex before you turn in, then into a fast right-hander that tightens a little bit. Then you go down the hill through a left-hander and then brake into a usually second gear left-hander here, fairly tight corner, short straight, and then into a multi-apex right-hander. I would say probably double apex on a 2. There we go. Widens towards the end, then a short straight, and then the final downhill right-hander, and then you're back to the main straight. With that, let's get into the competitors. First of the disqualified cars was the AG Formula 1 V6 race car. By the way, disqualified because it was too expensive. It has short gearing and good grip, but it could use more power, and it's also got mild oversteer on turn in. Against it is the MZMA G1 F1. This has good turning and good braking, but it instantly locks up the rear tires on power because it's got a clutch differential, which is why it was disqualified. The AG versus the MZMA, I would say both cars are fairly evenly matched on the straights. I would give a small advantage to the MZMA in terms of braking. Handling, they're about the same again, maybe the MZMA is slightly better, but the advantage that the AG has is that it's able to put down the power better, and thus it can go on the throttle sooner while the MZMA is still oversteering due to its diff. And so the two cars are very evenly matched through this right-hander as well, and down the hill. And you can see how unstable the MZMA is under throttle, even in the higher speeds where you're just trying to go straight. It's not unmanageable, it's just, something you need to always be aware of. And as they approach the final corner, both cars are still pretty much neck and neck, but the AG can put down the power a little bit better, and thus it will cross the finish line first in 59.430. This car is called The Reason Why I Should Quit Automation. It's got a great paint color, but it drives like a lawnmower. It's slow, got a solid front axle, and poor braking performance. This is the Falcon Type 6. I'd love to tell you what its strengths are, but it doesn't actually work in BeamNG due to excessive engine stress. Now sit back, relax, grab a coffee, and odds are the car on the left is still going to be going around this track. Jokes aside, the reason why I should quit automation is by far the slowest car out of any submitted car, and that's probably by design. It's sort of a troll entry, and you can see it lifting the front wheel through the corner, while the Falcon is still obviously not moving at all because it can't. And yeah, just sit back, grab a beer, grab a coffee, and enjoy the rest of this lap, and then we get into the actual competitors. Our first competitor is the Coventry Climax FPF Mark II by Genja FT. It's got a high top speed because it's got a very low drag coefficient, and it's got good traction coming out of corners, but the brakes are pretty weak and it's underpowered relative to all the other cars. Up against it is the HFF Cake 61 Mark II Fiona 1 by Aero. It's got a very powerful engine and fairly predictable handling, but the brakes fade very quickly and it's unstable in quick transitions. It can snap oversteer. So on to our first head-to-head, the Coventry Climax versus the HFF Cake. And the HFF is already faster down the straight here, and on the braking the HFF has a small advantage while the brakes last anyway. And while it did run wide, it got a tight line again for the second apex here, and it's got a small lead already for the first checkpoint. Now it can really open the taps, running wide a little bit through the grass, but we're okay. And then through this fast right-hander, down the hill, and down into this left-hander. And now the HFF is a little unstable here compared to the Coventry, which is more composed through here. But then again, the Coventry doesn't have the power that the HFF has, and as a result, the HFF is going to continue building its lead, coming down into the final corner and onto the main straight, and it's going to take this head-to-head win with a time of 59.446. In our next head-to-head we have the Blue Streak. This has good acceleration, predictable handling, and it's got good traction coming out of the corner, but under 8,000 RPM the engine is noticeably lacking in torque, so you gotta be at the right RPM at all times. Up against the Blue Streak is the Minos Motors 136. It's got a really powerful engine and good traction on exit, but it's got strong wobble on the braking, which results in poor braking performance and sometimes oversteer on the braking. So the Blue Streak versus the Minos. Both cars really fast down the straight, but the Minos just a little bit faster. But under braking you can see that the Blue Streak is going to close the gap as the Minos wobbles quite a lot and goes wide as a result of that. Comes back in for the second apex, and so both cars are neck and neck for this first checkpoint. Opening the taps, the Minos is just a little bit faster on the straights. And through this right-hander it has a small lead, but we're approaching another big braking zone and the Blue Streak just brakes better. As a result, even for the second checkpoint as well, both cars still neck and neck. Through this long right-hander, both cars slight oversteer, but nothing too dramatic here. And then through this final corner, again oversteer on both sides as you would expect from 60s F1 cars, but the Minos will clock in just a little bit faster at 59.216. Next we have the Catan Corse F1. This has aggressive turning and good traction on corner exit, but it's got a low top speed due to short gearing, and it's very unstable at high speeds. Up against it is the Vento XF Caldera. This has a strong engine and good braking, but it's already got mild oversteer on turn in, so as you progressively feed in the throttle it's only going to oversteer more if you're not careful. So on to the head-to-head. As we've established, the Vento is faster down the straights, so even though they crossed the finish line at the exact same time in the video because of editing, you can already see, due to the Vento's faster speed and better brakes, it's already slightly ahead through this first double right-hander. Not by much, but nonetheless it will pass the first checkpoint first, and it's going to increase its lead over the Catan Corse, which itself is a fine handling car, but the Vento is just as good in handling for all intents and purposes, at least in my opinion, and it's faster. So this is just a matter of both cars are evenly matched in handling. It's just that one is faster than the other, and the result of that, as you can see, as both cars come onto the main straight, the Vento is ahead and it's going to keep the lead and clock in at 1 minute .019. Our next contender is the Tarske HF408. It's got a very powerful engine and good braking performance, but it oversteers everywhere, even in a straight line, and it's unstable at just about any speed, but especially at high speeds. Up against it is the Scarab Cirrus M1. It's got good braking, good turning, good traction coming out of corner, powerful engine, but the gearing is a little bit weird and might hold it back just a little bit. Now these two couldn't be more different from one another. The Scarab on the one hand does everything you want at all times. One power, it's got it in spades. One braking, it stops on a dime. One turning, it turns in nicely, progressively, and doesn't overdo it. And it puts the power down on exit. As a result, it's already in the lead, as you can see. Whereas the Tarske does nothing you might want, at least not the way you would want it to. Yeah, it's got a powerful engine, but as you can see, it's completely out of control and just sliding everywhere. It cannot possibly make use of any of that power, and even the turning is too aggressive. It just can't take a corner cleanly unless you slow way down. And obviously we know sliding is slow, and so the Scarab will finish much faster at 59.328. Next we have the Delcia Amali. This has nice handling and good traction out of the corners, but it's lacking in horsepower and also in braking power. Against it is the Saber 11. This has amazing power and good brakes, but it likes to oversteer both on turn in and also on corner exit. Once again, these two are pretty much polar opposites to one another. The Delcia Amali is very well balanced in the corners, but just lacking in horsepower and also doesn't have the best brakes. The Saber is kind of like what would happen if you took the Scarab and cranked everything up to 11, meaning there's more of everything. It's just a little too much sometimes. You want power, it's got so much of it that it can introduce power oversteer at 120 miles an hour in 4th gear. You want braking, it's got more brake force than the Scarab, and so it might lock up. It's good when you don't lock up, but there's a greater risk of locking up, and for turning it turns even harder than the Scarab, and so hard in fact that it often rotates the rear end around. All in all, the Saber is very quick if you get it right, but doing so is much more difficult than other cars. Even so, it clocks in with 59.256. The first car in our final pairing is the Aero GP4 Hermes. This has great handling, and you can brake hard at all times because the brake force is quite low, so the brakes don't lock up. But it could use more power and the gearing could be a little bit better. Last but not least is the Martin 2005 Supercar. It's got a high top speed, the highest out of any car, but it's actually fairly low on power. The brake bias is too far forward and the higher gears are too long. Now, on paper you might think these two are going to be fairly similar because I criticized both of them for having low power and weird gearing. However, the critical difference is with the braking and with the handling, where the Aero GP4 is much more stable. It also turns better. The Martin 2005 Supercar, its handling is fine. There's nothing necessarily wrong with it, but the GP4 is just better tuned, better set up, in terms of its handling. It turns more quickly, and it's also stable, a little bit more stable through the corners in spite of the more aggressive front end. So all in all, the difference between these two is gonna come down to handling rather than power. And you can see the Aero GP4 is ahead, and it's going to be much more stable here for this last corner and keep more speed for the final straight. And it's going to finish with a 59.368. So to sum up, I think the Minos won not only because it is one of the most powerful cars in the field, but also because out of the ones that are similar, like the Saber and the HFF, out of those three, the Minos is the one that's able to put down the power the best at the exit of the corner. So it can accelerate sooner and hit a higher speed faster, and that apparently offsets even its pretty wonky braking performance, at least on this track. We'll see how that goes on the other tracks. And that's why it clocked in with the fastest time, just ahead of the Saber 11. If you enjoyed the video, please leave a like. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.